Even in a year when it was difficult to do so, with most of the embassies being closed, a record number of Americans are renouncing their citizenship. Green card holders are handing back in their green cards. Today, I'm going to share with you some things that you should consider after renouncing your U.S. citizenship. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson. This is Nomad Capitalist. We're the channel and the company that helps 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best. Now, renouncing your citizenship is an extreme step, and it's certainly not for everybody. It's something where, generally speaking, you're going to want to do that after you've been living overseas for some period of time, after you've experienced life beyond the United States or whatever country that you are from. But as we've talked about for years, the United States is essentially the only country in the world that has full-scale, never-ending, citizenship-based taxation, where even if you don't spend a single day in the United States, you are liable to taxation. Now, there's ways to reduce that. There are exemptions, exclusions, what have you. But if you just want to be free, if you want to be able to pay as little as zero tax, if you just want to be out of the regulations and everything that comes with being a U.S. citizen, then renunciation is a topic we've talked about before. I don't want to go into the pros and cons of that here, but what I do want to tell you is, if you've taken that step and you see some of the embassies reopening now in the United States, what is it that you're going to do afterwards? Now, this is not a holistic list, but it's a couple things to think about I'm going to share with you today. Number one is take a moment and just analyze the situation. Pop the champagne, as you will. Now, I don't like to take a situation that, giving up the citizenship perhaps of your birth with a cavalier attitude of pop the champagne. If that's what you're going to do, go ahead. But I think that analyzing the situation, taking a deep breath, and just looking around you and saying, now I've got a different situation. I'll tell you what happened after I expatriated. I just went out, just for the heck of it, because I'm the Nomad Capitalist, went out and just set up a Belize company. Now, I don't believe in Belize companies for most people's situation. There's a few limited circumstances where Belize companies work. By and large, good luck getting a bank account. Good luck having your company respected by almost anybody. I'm not a fan of Belize, but it's one of the easiest places in the world to set up a company, which is perhaps why you have the problems that you do with Belize companies. And so I just went and set one up because no longer was I required in that new tax year to file a form to the U.S. government informing them that I set up a company and what was happening in that company. I could just set it up, and I eventually closed the company down, but it was kind of a fun exercise of, this is the new freedom that I have. I am the goody two-shoes of the offshore world. Someone threw that at me once, and I wear it with pride. I do not want to run afoul of any of the laws, but when I knew I could open up companies and not have to worry about filing forms, open up bank accounts and not file forms, do certain things and not worry about getting in trouble, I said, okay, which of those things would I like to do? I think it's worthwhile just assessing, what can I do now that I no longer have citizenship and I no longer have the obligations of that citizenship? That's step one. The second thing that I'm going to want to do, and again, some of these things you should be planning for, and if I'm working with you, I'm going to be planning for in the steps up to the renunciation, but assess my U.S. assets, okay? One of the things that people will tell me is, I don't trust my country. It could be the U.S., could be Mexico, could be any country. I have this from people all over the world. I don't trust my country. And obviously, if you're giving up your citizenship, I mean, that's certainly a vote of no confidence in some regards. But what I'll see some people do is they'll say, I want to keep my old home in the United States. I want to pass it down to my kids. Or, I love investing in U.S. stocks. Or I'm an angel investor. I have shares in U.S. companies. These things all may be potentially a tax issue for you. Now, obviously, U.S. source income, no matter what your citizenship is going to be taxed in the United States. You may need to file a non-resident tax return. If you have dividends from U.S. companies, your new tax home will determine what kind of withholding tax applies to that. But what also is not that well known is that certain U.S. assets may be subject to U.S. estate tax at your death if they're not properly structured. And so assets that you would hold in your own name may be better placed in some kind of structure. And so you'll want to get some tax planning advice on how do you structure assets that are in the U.S. From my perspective, I said, to a certain extent, I'm going to invest more in places like Singapore. I'm going to invest more in funds that are based overseas. I'm going to invest more in real estate outside of the United States. I'm going to have a pretty clean portfolio because I don't want to deal with this stuff. I don't want to deal with all kinds of structuring. But if you're heavy into U.S. stocks, for example, if you have, again, angel investments, LLCs, real estate, there's probably a way you're going to want to structure that to avoid some taxes where you left the country and then you're going to get hit again at death. You don't want to get into that situation, so do that assessment. What you're also going to do, number 3, is make sure you get your final tax returns together. I'm not here to give you tax advice. We do work with a number of tax professionals who are specialized in this kind of stuff, and we kind of manage all that to where you want to make sure you get that final tax return. Part of the year you were a U.S. citizen, part of the year you weren't. How does that work? Generally, file an final F-bar for your bank accounts. If you had foreign bank accounts, if you had foreign companies, all the things that you needed to file, make sure you get that done. Don't leave, don't put yourself in tax non-compliance at the end, and make sure you file your expatriation tax return where you list all of your assets, you answer all the questions. Make sure you get that filed on time. Don't get yourself in trouble, because hopefully before you renounced, you did a whole analysis of your tax situation. Do you owe an exit tax? Do you not owe an exit tax? Hopefully, you renounced at the right time to where you maximize the value of all of that. Don't not file stuff. Again, I'm not here giving you tax advice, but I am saying make sure you file all the final forms. Don't just say, oh, it's done. I'm done forever. You're going to get in trouble if you don't file those final forms. Step number 4 is, now that you've figured out that your assets are out of the U.S., or at least you've structured them properly, now that you've squared up with the IRS, where are you going to be taxed now? I mean, one of the good things, I guess, about being a U.S. citizen is that you always have that U.S. tax home. That's always a tax residence that you have. And so while a lot of banks may not want to take you, you may not be eligible for certain investments, you can always say, I'm a taxpayer in the United States. You don't really have to do anything about it. You don't have to set up shop anywhere else. I mean, things like the foreign earned income exclusion that you would have used while you were a U.S. citizen, one of the criteria, or one of the categories, doesn't even really require you to have a fixed home in one place where you spend all of your time. And so the idea of where is your tax home may be new to you. You're going to want to go, and either if you're spending a good amount of your time in one place, that may just be a de facto tax home, and you'll want to get a tax ID number there, and you'll want to set up shop and make that your tax home. And so obviously, if your goal is to reduce taxes, you're going to not want to go and have a tax home in France and spend 9 months a year in France, or in any other high tax country. But if you want to go and live in Dubai for 6 months, or if you want to go and live in Bangkok or in Panama City for 6 months, that could work. What's the process to claim your tax ID number? If you're in a treaty country where you have things like U.S. dividend income you want to deal with, how do you set that up? If you're not in a treaty country, should you look at a treaty country? Fine, you spend a good amount of your time there, you get the tax resident status, you're in good shape. What if your plan is to be a nomad? I have a guy who renounced a couple years ago, came to me and said, hey, I want to beef up my portfolio. He's been traveling around with really only one fixed home where he spends 3 months a year. The rest of the time he's just traveling on his passport. And what a guy like that needs is a tax home where maybe you are making an investment in a tax residence where you only need to spend 30 days per year there, or 3 weeks per year there, or 1 week per year there. And so ask yourself, would I rather pay $75,000 or $20,000, or would I rather put $100,000 in the bank, or would I rather buy some real estate, or whatever? Would I rather do those things to get a tax home without the commitment of spending time, so I can continue to be nomadic and I can live the trifecta lifestyle, for example, or I can just carry a suitcase behind me? Or do I want to spend 6 months in one place? You want to have a tax home. Where is it you're paying tax? Now, if you are, again, not tax advice, if you are just like entirely in crypto and you really are just in no one place for very long, maybe there's some limited circumstances like that where the tax home isn't as important. But really, I mean, if you want to function in the world, you want to tell people, where are you paying tax? That's increasingly important now. So where's that tax home? You've lost your default tax home. Maybe you already are living in another place. Maybe you're already living in Thailand before you renounced, and so you can just keep using that. But you need to go and get your tax ID and register and get a certificate, the stuff that comes with that. The other thing is, for folks who want to return to the U.S., hopefully you have a strategy to do that, but you want to now execute that strategy. And so if you have a visa waiver program passport, or if you're Canadian, it's simply a matter of going through. If you're Canadian, you just basically show up. If you're a visa waiver program passport holder, like if you're Italian, or if you're from New Zealand, or Chilean, or Japanese, or whatever, you want to go through the process of ESTA, and you can come back in that way generally. If you don't have access to the U.S. through your passport. What kind of visa are you going to get? Most people get a tourist visa. What's your plan to get a tourist visa? Where do you live? Do you qualify for a tourist visa? Or do you qualify for some other visa? Some people have a business in the U.S. Occasionally someone renounces, but they still have a business on the ground with employees in the U.S., and then that's part of their business, and so they pay some tax in the U.S., but globally now they're out of the system. Could that entitle you to, let's say, an E2 visa, if you're Grenadian or have some other passport that has E2 access? Could you get one of the more, the more rare visas? Are you an O1 visa? This is obviously difficult in terms of coming back into the country. There's some people who probably don't want you to come back into the country. But what is that visa strategy to get back in? How is that going to be executed? These are the kinds of things you want to think about. And I tell people that you have to make some choices sometimes. If you want to keep all your assets in the U.S., that's fine. The U.S. is very open to having foreigners invest in the country, and if you feel comfortable with that, go ahead and do it. Not everyone renounces to save money on tax. Some people renounce to simplify their affairs. Some people renounce to get other citizenships that don't allow dual. Some people renounce for just personal reasons, freedom or political, what have you. So understand where your assets are, understand how you're going to come back to the country if that's a goal, but also understand you've got to make some choices in terms of it may be easier to have some assets outside of the country. It may be easier to diversify into other investments. It may be the case that you don't need or want to go back to the U.S., or that it will be more difficult to do that. So these are the kinds to think about. These are the things to think about after renouncing your citizenship. These are the steps to take, just a few of many. Don't stop now. We've got well over 1,000 more videos here on YouTube for you to watch and learn how to go where you're treated best. And if you want to work with Nomad Capitalist personally, go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply, learn about our unique, tried and true process, garnered over years of experience, and learn how you can become our client.